Yeah, I mean, this is. I'll be honest. The biggest failing with us at the moment with Unplugged is pretty much all of the London team is white and from the home counties, and I think what people get wrong about diversity is the business impact and the power of having different perspectives sat around the table. And I think that is where like it becomes a, people think that they just need to do it to make everyone happy, but it's also just good business to have people around the table. So
I do have more empathy for a startup founder who's raised capital, who has the pressure of I need to hire quickly, than a large corporation who can afford to actually widen the net, take their time, and get the right person in. Not to say that the startup founder shouldn't be doing it, but it's a lot easier for a large organization than a startup that's under that time pressure of I've got 6 months left in the bank. I really need to get someone in today.
yeah, it's really hard. Like I've really tried and failed so far. Like I remember me and Ben when we hired our first role, head of operations. We went through 300-400 applications, CVs, chose 4 or 5, and then looked at it and was like, these are just probably the 4 or 5 most similar people to us, because you can picture how someone who's like you
It's
can
safety,
do
what you
good. Like,
know.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, because you can relate to it. Whereas someone who's from a completely different background, completely different experience, it's harder for you to understand just what value they can bring. So it's super tricky in the early stage, and as you say, like it is just all hands on deck. But it's something that I'm really keen to crack as we go. I mean, how do you see? Because you're going into big organisations now. I mean, how do you see them adopting it?
Mixed response, to be honest, but I think there's a recognition with a lot of the large organizations that there's this intergenerational challenge, like the needs of a baby boomer versus a Gen X, Gen Y, Gen Z, and millennial are very different. So actually, how do I cater for this workforce where I have multiple needs because we're serving multiple generations? And what does our customer base of the future look like? What does our leadership of the future look like? And how do we start preparing for that today? Right, so that's what the larger organizations are thinking of. When I'm hiring Percy, I think a lot around like what journey is that individual trying to go on in life, and how do we fit into their bigger picture? And I try and double down on them being a geek on that role rather than a geek about this subject matter of what we're doing as a business. And I know that sounds a bit juxtapositioned, but social media is a classic example of that, where like with a social media person, I really want to understand what they geek out, what they look at, what they're keen on, what they create themselves, what they're watching outside of our industry, what kind of things really inspire them and why. And that tells me that that's someone that's resilient and passionate and smart enough to experiment and try things out for me, because they're into it so much. And I can teach them the angel investing knowledge. You can leave that to me. Whereas if someone comes on board and they're a geek at angel investing, but they're not great at the social media, I'm not going to get the results that I want. Right. So I try and optimize for, I do want someone that's value aligned, even though I don't want them to be like me. But I want that value alignment more from the facts that there's a philosophy in how I believe that we should be as a team. And you're buying into this philosophy. You know, it's like Pep Guardiola at Man City. There's a philosophy that you're bringing in by becoming that manager of that team. And I see the same with my team. Like being inclusive is a big deal to me. Like, it's a deal breaker if you're not. You know, that's what I care about personally. And my personal value has become the company value, right? There's other values that have been shaped by us together as a company, like setting the standard and nurturing people to that standard. That's something everyone in my team does, right? So I don't mind working with someone that's more inexperienced or a partner that's not there, but it's our job to get them to the standard. What are you doing to nurture that person to that standard, right? And we get called out. I get called out sometimes. And that person, why don't you nurture them to the standard? He said, there's a value. Yeah, it's true, I should be. I'm going to go back and have another conversation. And what you notice is these values are getting reinforced now by my team and not only me, because they buy and subscribe into it. Because actually, I think it pattern matches to personal values that they have too. I think it's very difficult when someone has different value set personally and you're trying to get them into your value set. It's just going to be tension and they don't want to change who they are, right? They're like molded clay. You can't wet it and remold it again. Versus when it's someone that's young and, you know, they're molding that clay for the first time, you're shaping certain mental models. Actually, it's a lot easier to get them on board and aligned with this opportunity, especially when you show them how you fit into the bigger picture of who they want to become.